The village of San Bernadino tried to forget Giuseppe's tragic end, but Pinocchio's shadow loomed over them. Children whispered about soft wooden footsteps following them at dusk, and villagers claimed to see glowing eyes watching from the forest's edge. The laughter was the worst. It was faint, childlike, but filled with malice, echoing in the stillness of the night. Father Marconi, the village priest, decided enough was enough. He gathered a group of brave men, armed with torches and prayers, and marched to Giuseppe's abandoned workshop. Inside, the air was heavy, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The remnants of Giuseppe's work lay scattered, but Pinocchio was nowhere to be seen. As they turned to leave, the priest noticed movement in the shadows outside. A small wooden figure darted between the trees, too fast for its stiff limbs. It felt like mockery, a taunt. The priest muttered a prayer under his breath, but he knew that words alone wouldn't banish the darkness. In the following days, the puppet's presence grew bolder. Marco, the blacksmith's apprentice, woke up screaming after dreaming that Pinocchio was perched on his chest, its grin impossibly wide. Villagers found tiny wooden footprints leading to their doors, only to vanish in the morning light. The laughter became more frequent, echoing from the empty streets after dark. The whispers among the villagers turned into accusations. Some claimed Giuseppe had cursed the village with his grief, while others blamed the old woman who had given him the strange wood. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. Pinocchio was no longer just a puppet. It was alive, and it was angry. The old woman returned one stormy evening, her silhouette barely visible through the downpour. Her once fierce presence had withered into something frail and sorrowful. She knocked on the priest's door, and when he opened it, she looked at him with haunted eyes and told him the truth. The wood Giuseppe had used was cursed, she explained, a relic of a boy who had been abandoned and betrayed. His soul had seeped into the wood, twisting into something vengeful. The puppet was never meant to be made, but once it was, it became a vessel for his wrath. The priest demanded to know how to stop it, but the old woman shook her head. The spirit feeds on grief and fear. It grows stronger each day. The only way to stop it is to give it what it wants most: a family, a home, a sense of belonging. The village elders hatched a desperate plan. They chose the Florios, a grieving couple who had lost their only child, to take Pinocchio into their home. The Florios agreed, believing their love might soothe the spirit's anger. They moved into Giuseppe's old workshop, now filled with an oppressive silence. For weeks, nothing happened. Pinocchio sat silently in the corner, its wide grin almost innocent. The Florios spoke to it kindly, placing it at the dinner table and tucking it into bed. It felt absurd, but they were determined to prove their love could tame the darkness. Then, one night, the puppet moved. The Florios awoke to find it standing by their bedroom door, its glassy eyes fixed on them. They spoke softly, pleading with it to stay calm. But the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch across the room. The next morning, Pinocchio was back in its corner, motionless. But the Florios knew they were being watched. One stormy night, the old woman returned. She told the Florios there was no peace for the puppet. Its pain was too deep, its soul too fractured. The only way to end the curse was for one of them to willingly take its place. A soul for a soul, she explained. Only a parent's love could soothe its torment. Mrs. Florio, still mourning her daughter, stepped forward. She held Pinocchio in her arms, whispering to it as if it were her lost child. Her voice trembled, but there was no hesitation in her movements. The old woman began the ritual, her words rising above the howling wind. Pinocchio began to shudder, its wooden limbs creaking as if resisting the pull. The room filled with a blinding light, and the air grew heavy with the scent of ash and decay. When the light faded, Pinocchio was gone. In its place was a small wooden heart, smooth and lifeless. Mrs. Florio was nowhere to be seen. The villagers buried the wooden heart beneath the tallest tree in the forest, marking the grave with a simple stone. They vowed never to speak of Pinocchio again, though the story became a whispered legend passed down to warn children against the dangers of curiosity and grief. Years later, travelers passing through the village sometimes spoke of a faint laughter in the woods, or a fleeting shadow darting between the trees. If they lingered too long, they might hear a soft knock at their door late at night. And if they were brave, or foolish enough to answer, they might see the faint outline of a small figure standing in the moonlight. Pinocchio was gone, but the curse remained, waiting patiently for the next heartbroken soul to bring it back to life.